You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Love Over Addiction podcast, or if you're brand new, then welcome, and we're so happy to have you here. My name is Joe, and I'm here to let you know what to expect from this episode and what you'll hear from Michelle. So this week we have another interview, which we've heard from you, our community, loud and clear that you all love hearing these interviews. The woman we'll hear from today is part of our Love Over Addiction Stay or Go program, and we talk about big issues like discovering codependency, finding professionals that understand addiction and how to handle it when they're not the right fit, and we talk about navigating excuses and blame. And we also discuss finding peace in your decisions and learning to let go of that guilt. We loved this hour with her and Michelle, and we hope you do too. As always, let's settle in and create a judgment-free, safe space for her to share her story with us. Enjoy!
So, Maud, thank you so much for agreeing to share your story with me. I am so grateful, and not just with me, but with our community, because we've received so much feedback that these interviews and these stories are really helping our community relate to one another and to assure them that they're not alone and that there are other people that have gone through this. And so, again, just thank you for being willing to be vulnerable today. I am incredibly honored that you would trust us with your story. So,
well, thank you, Michelle, for. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I was just saying thank you so much for receiving me, and I was really inspired by other women's testimonies. So I'm really happy to talk today, and I hope maybe it can help someone.
Oh, I know you're going to help plenty of people. I know you are. So, okay, let's get started at the beginning. How did you meet your ex-husband, and when did you know there might be an issue with substance abuse?
Okay, so I met him. I'm originally from a big town, and I didn't want to live in the city anymore, so I moved to the country, and I wanted to change my life, and that's where I met him. I had begun a new job, and my ex-husband was working at a youth center, and like for my job, I met him there, and so we began like a friendship. We were talking a lot and had we like talking about stuff, and then that's how we began our relationship. And I could say that he never hid his addiction from me. He smoked marijuana, and so he told me, like, as from the beginning, I knew that he was smoking. He was smoking in front of me every night, and so you could say, oh, this was a red flag from the beginning. But the problem is that I come from a family with addiction. My two parents are alcoholics. So from a very young age, I learned that, overusing or using a substance every night was like something that was acceptable, because it was never said in my family that there was alcoholism. It was just like the way things were. So I didn't see a problem in my ex-husband using. I thought, like, he told me, oh, I'm just more relaxed. And I was, yeah, it's true. He's just more relaxed. He doesn't have like any aggressivity that, when you use alcohol, when you drink, you become more aggressive. But when you smoke pot, you're like more relaxed. So I was like, oh, there's no problem there. And so the first time I really thought to myself, oh my God, I'm living with an addict and I don't want this in my life anymore. It was 5 years later, 5 years in our relationship, and I was 5 months pregnant with our first daughter. So I was already deep in the relation. That's when I first really told myself that, he really is an addict and he won't get rid of this using, and it really it takes a toll on his life and on our life.
So was it because now that you were with a child, did you try to ask him to stop and he refused? And is that how you knew that this was a real issue and not just something he did recreationally?
Yeah. The thing was, when I was pregnant, we moved. We went from one city to another. And I remember a night we had arrived like a couple of days before, and he was looking for a dealer. He was looking for drugs. And he was frantic. He was crazy. It was like, oh my God, I need my drugs. And he was only thinking about this. And I had lived that in the past with him. Sometimes you lose a dealer, you have to find another, or you didn't have drugs. But that particular time, he went in the night, and he went with a friend who was using too. And I think it's because I was pregnant, because it had happened maybe in the past. But that time, we were becoming a family soon, and I was to be a mom. And I thought, oh my God, my husband can't live without this substance. I really understand it now. And he won't stop. And now I'm going to have a baby. So I don't want this substance in my family and in my baby's life. So maybe, it's the fact that I was becoming a mom. And the next morning, I talked to him. I told him, okay, I see you have, you have an addiction problem. You like to use this drug, and you've told me like over and over that it helps you, it makes you more relaxed. But for me, I don't want it in my life. So if you want, we can part ways. I offered him like we can, we'll have a baby and we'll share custody, whatever. But of course, he said, oh no, I'm going to stop. I'm reducing. I'm going to stop. Don't worry. I want to be with you and I want to get rid of this addiction. And maybe there was a part of him that was really thinking it. And maybe there was a part of him that wanted to, cause I was providing with money. He had problems with keeping jobs. So maybe there was a part of the addiction that wanted to keep me there, to protect his addiction.
And so what happened then? You had your baby.
Yeah, I had my baby, and when my baby was like 2 months old, when I was in the last stages of my pregnancy, I contacted the local center, because here in my country we have a local free centers for addiction, and they offer support for parents and spouses. So I went to like a group for 10 weeks, and there were moms there were girlfriends and stuff. So we were talking about the addiction, but at that time, I'm not sure I was so ready. I was more saying, oh, my husband, his problem is more anxiety, He has a lot of anxiety. He probably has a PTSD, because he has lived some traumas. So I don't know. I wasn't ready, I think. Even there was a part of me that went to these groups, so I was conscious of a problem. And I was really pregnant with my baby, so of course I was hoping that everything was going to be okay and stuff. So I went to this group, and I arranged with the woman there that my ex-husband would go and meet someone, and he went and met someone once and then didn't go back. So that ended that. And when my daughter was 2 months old, I still was really unhappy, so we went to see a social worker, like for a couples therapy. And the woman, she was good, but sadly, she was really, really not well versed in addiction, because the addiction was brought up. We talked about it, and she was like, "Oh no, that's not the big problem. The big problem is you, ma'am, are really controlling, and Mister,
Oh
you probably
no.
have anxiety and PTSD. So yes, so it was like my poor victim husband, and you know, she there was something that was true in there, but after looking back after what I know now about addiction, I'm like, well, no, she should have addressed addiction. Of course, this was the big problem in our relationship, and I'm thinking, and she was a licensed professional, you know, she wasn't like some hippie or anything. But yeah, so we arrived to a conclusion where, okay, I was to stop having not tantrums, but you know, I was to stop having some well, yeah, so because sometimes I lost my temper, so I was to stop losing my temper, and he was to stop using drugs within the next 2 years, you know, and there was a plan, but there was no support whatsoever, and of course the plan never went through. Yeah, so the responsibility was really, well, I felt like the responsibility was a lot on my shoulders. So that's how it ended that time. You know, it's kind of cycles where you want to change things, and then you're like, oh no, it's not that bad. So that was the end of that cycle. After that I was like, okay, it's not that bad. And my husband had found a job after that, so I was like, oh, maybe we can have a family after all. And yeah, he says it's gonna change, and we have this plan where he's gonna reduce using and stuff like that. So I had another baby, and then.
And then what? What happened when you had the other baby?
Yeah, I had my other baby, and while I was pregnant, my husband lost another job. That's his problem. He's not high functional, so he kept losing jobs, and that was really distressing for me, of course, because it wasn't the first time. It was always the same thing, always, because he kept fighting with his bosses, and I covered for him. I lied to my family. I lied to his mother. His mom was living in the same town as us, and we were like faking that he was going to work like for months. Okay, this was crazy. Yeah, so I had my baby, and of course, you know how it is when you have a baby. You are so tired. I breastfed them, so you are really tired from breastfeeding and getting up at night, and so the energy to. Well, you were really strong, Michelle, and I know there are women that do it, that go when they have a little baby. I didn't have the energy for that. I was just, okay, now just concentrate, take care of your kids. And, that all my energy was there.
I understand completely, and I know so many women can relate to that. So I interrupted you. I'm so sorry. Will you go back to, so you were covering it from his parents. You had a second child. You knew he just had lost his job again, and you were feeling exhausted, and just taking care of your second child was just overwhelming. So what happened next?
Okay. So it's a long story, but then I believed other promises, because it's what we do. We believe promises. So my husband said, well, he received his father died, and he received a big amount of money. Okay, and his mom was like, okay, this money is for buying a house. Okay, and we wanted a house because we were living in an apartment, so we wanted to buy a house. So, okay, and my parents, they at that time we were on better terms. So my dad and my mom said, okay, we're gonna give you money too if you want to buy a house. And my husband had lost a number of jobs at the city that we were, so we said, oh, let's move once again. Because we had moved like 3 times, always because it wasn't going well in some place. So he said, let's move once again. Let's go back to where we met. because there I have people I know, we have friends, everything is going to be okay. So I thought, yeah, it's going to be okay. You know, when I think back on it, I'm like, oh, I was so stupid, but I know I wasn't stupid. It's just, I was so deep in that addiction cycle, and I so wanted things to change. I was ready for anything. So I said, okay, I have a 2-month baby and a 2-year-old, and yeah, let's go and find a house and move 2 hours from where we are, and let's do it. And yeah, and in that place that he loves so much, he's gonna find a job and he's gonna keep it. So we found a house. We found a house there, and we moved, and that was really also it took a lot of energy from me, because of course I was doing, you know, finding the movers and doing the boxes. I was doing a lot of the work. So we moved, and it took several weeks. He wasn't, of course, looking for a job. I asked him and nagged, and at last he found a job, but like working like 10 hours a week, and I was really anyways, that wasn't such a great job, but okay, at least that was a job. And we moved, and we acted as if everything was okay, and we found daycare for the kids, and I also found a job when my son was 1 year, because I had we have a moment where we can stay with our kids, like the government pays us, and then we have to go back to work. So I found a job. And then, because my husband's job wasn't paying much, I accepted like a higher paying job that was a lot of responsibility, a job that I had never done before. It was, directing, managing and stuff. So that was really stressful for me to take that job, and it really was to pay the bills. And at some point, it was like not a year. We had moved like for 10 months, and I became really depressed, really anxious. I felt like I had no control over my life. Like my life was a mess. I was a mess. I was like shouting at my kids. I couldn't even do a garden. I was judging myself a lot. And I became suicidal. I began to think about killing myself, because I was so under the impression that I was a mess and a failure. So I thought more and more about suicide. And at some point I thought, well, that's not normal. You've got to get help. You can't just go in a spiral, because it's not going to end well, of course. So that's where something changed. I went really down, and then I called the woman. I said, I'm gonna go get help. I called a social worker, and that's the woman that led me to the path of transformation and the path of freedom. And well, I began to walk too. Because I wasn't. It's kind of funny to say that, but I wasn't moving, and I began to walk during my lunch breaks, and that really helped my mental health too. Just moving, and then I met that woman, and she did the EMDR therapy. It's like for trauma victims and stuff, but it's also good to just explore your past. So we explored a lot of my family issues and my past. And at some point, like a couple of months into the therapy, because I was also talking to her about my relationship and my family and stuff, and she said, well, have you ever heard of codependency? And I was like, well, no. No. And she said, okay, you should look into it, and there's a book by Melody Beattie, and you should look into it. And I looked, and I was like, this was a revelation, I was like, oh yes, that's me. That's me. And I read the book, and I made a list of like 28 things, like big things that I had done or accepted for my husband, and I was, oh, this is crazy. I can't do this anymore. I can't cover and lie and protect and enable. That's enough. So, yeah, I decided I would go get help for this.
That was wonderful. Good for you. What a big, courageous step. And I love that you took a step to help yourself, whether your husband was showing signs of getting sober or getting worse. That was huge, huge. That you realized it wasn't just about getting him better, that you had some work to do yourself, which is huge.
Yes,
So
you're right. And yeah,
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying you're so right, because I had tried, for so many years I was asking him to stop and stop or just reduce using, but at some point it just became about me. When you are so unwell, you have to take care of yourself. And I was really lucky to find this woman on my path, because I had seen some other people, some other counselors and stuff who didn't direct me to codependency or just, what it is to be the spouse of an addict. So, yeah, so that's when I decided to take care of myself.
Yeah, you raise a really good point too, because I think finding the right help is so important. There are so many bad counselors out there. It's like we think, because they have a degree, they have the authority and they're going to know more than I do, and so we stick with bad counselors. And that's not true. And we really do need to, if the first one or second one or third one doesn't feel right, trust your gut. And it might not be that they're bad counselors, it just might not be the right fit for you. But I love that you found somebody who knows the background about addiction and codependency. I think that's key. Absolutely so important to know. And so it's okay also to have, when you're looking for a therapist, it's really okay to, ask for a phone call and come in with some questions. And one of those questions should be, can you tell me, are you familiar with codependency or addiction or anything of that sort? So you can weed through them without wasting your time or your money up front. So what happened next? You went and you got help. I love that you moved.
Yes.
I think that's so terrific that you were walking during lunch and you were getting therapy. And so what started to change in your life? Because you're now referring to him as your ex-husband, so I kind of know where this story's going.
Yeah. Well, of course. And after I realized I was codependent, I called the local center for addictions and asked for help, for individual help. That center that I had been to a group before, that time I was like, okay, now it's only, I need help and I want to meet someone and I want someone who can help me on my codependency. I want to get rid of that. And I also talked about it to my ex-husband, he was aware of that. So I met someone, and she was really great. She was sort of a social worker, but really specialized in addiction and in working with spouses of addicts. So she also was a great, great person on my path. She helped me, to just learn some simple tricks like taking care of myself a bit and stuff like that. She also helped me to accept medication, because I was really having trouble sleeping, and that was not helping my mood, not helping my parenting and my self-esteem, because I was not sleeping enough, so I wasn't patient and stuff. And I have to say it, because I think there's there's judgment on people who use medication, but for me it was a game changer. I was like, no, I don't need this, and it's not, yes, I have anxiety, but I can deal with it on my own. But this counselor, she was like, well, you can just accept it for a time, not for your whole life. And if you had diabetes, you would take that pill for your diabetes. Why not take it because you have anxiety and you have trouble sleeping? So I took
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
medication. yeah, that helped me a lot. I also tried Al-Anon. I went there at the beginning because there was a local group, and it was just good to be able to be there and speak my truth, this big secret that I have, because addiction was a big secret that like nobody knew in my life. But then I stopped, Al-Anon. I just went a couple times because, well, it wasn't for me, it's a good place, just maybe not for me. Yeah, so after in this local center for addiction, this woman, this counselor that was helping me, she also encouraged me because I was really thinking a lot about separation at that time. And she said, well, have you told your husband that you're thinking about separation if he doesn't stop using? And I said, no. So she said, well, just go and talk to him. Sometimes when we're living with addicts, we are so used to not saying what we think, to not voicing our needs, that we stop voicing even really important stuff. So I told my ex-husband, like, if you don't stop, I'm going. And he took me seriously, and he said, okay, I want to get help. You're right. I have a problem. I have an addiction problem. I want to get help. And he began his own addiction counseling. I was really lucky because I know there are a lot of men who don't accept that they have a problem. But he went. Today we are not together anymore, however, but that he went, so that was good for him. His mood was really not good. Okay, he was really depressed. So yeah, he went to get help.
Yeah.
But it wasn't regular, and I didn't see much progress. So I was like, okay, I need to see change, and I don't see it. So at that time, I also did something that was big for me. I broke the secret. I talked to a good friend of mine. I told her what was in my life. And that was really good for me, really important, to just tell someone what's happening in your life. And she was a really good friend. She said, okay, Maud, you can't stay all your life in that situation. And if, maybe you're going to stay all your life if nothing changes. And I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to check on you like regularly to make sure you do something about this situation. So that was great because she was there all along for me from that time. And then I found Stay or Go program. I found you, and that was really important. I was because my ex-husband was still having big job problems, was depressed, and I was happy for him that he had some addiction counseling, but I'm like, oh, this is not enough for me. So I was looking a lot on the internet about divorce and addiction, and I found you. And that really was great. I chose the Stay or Go program because I was there. I was like, am I staying or am I going? And I had done some work of, finding who I was and discovering back my values. I had done that work, so I was feeling ready for that program. And that really helped me too. I didn't know what a boundary was. I had no boundaries. So just learning, okay, what's a boundary? How can you find some good boundaries, and how can you implement them? That was really good. And with you also, I remember in like the first or second module of the program, there's something about dreaming about your life and visualizing your life. And that was, I remember dreaming of my life, of happiness and freedom. And that was really great. That was a great moment. And sadly, in my vision, my husband wasn't there. Yeah.
Do you feel guilty about that? I get the sense that, like, are you feeling like, are you okay with the fact that, I mean, he did what you asked him to do, but it wasn't enough? Have you, because you know about being dry drunk, right? Like, you know that's a thing, that even if they get sober, it doesn't mean that this nice guy will return. Sometimes removing the addiction is lovely and wonderful and good and necessary, but it's not the final solution, because you're dealing with a person whose growth has been stunted since the first time that they started their addiction, which is usually in their teenage years or, 20, and they have all of that emotional maturity to make up for. And that takes years and years and years. So in the meantime, withdrawing and, not having control over their lives can result in a very nasty person or a very depressed person. And, you've reached this pinnacle, you've done the work, you've been dedicated to your mental and, physical and spiritual health, and you're ready to fly, and they're just beginning, and it's not a guarantee that it's, just sobriety makes everything better. Are you experiencing any kind of are you at peace with the fact that you chose to leave?
Well, I think I feel a bit guilty because for so many years I was his savior. I was going to be the one who would save him. Okay, so that was my role for so many years. And I think that was one thing that led me to him, that made me fall in love with him. I would save him. So that maybe there's some residual guilt, but overall, I am just so happy to be free from addiction. This is, when I found Stay or Go, my ex-husband also decided to go to rehab on his own. I didn't push him, because he was so depressed. And I wasn't telling him what to do anymore. I was just saying, I believe in you. When he was telling me how his troubles and his problems, I was like, I believe in you. I believe in you. I'm not saying you should do this or you should do that. And I think that just saying, I believe in you, instead of telling him what to do, was something that gave him permission to find his own solutions, and at some point call his addiction counselor and saying, okay, now I'm ready. I'm ready for inpatient rehab, which he had always said he would never go to. So he decided he would go there, and I was really thrilled. Okay, I was really happy. He would go. It was like a 3 weeks place, really short, but it was free. So, but then he decided, at the last minute, I don't want to go at that place, and he went to like a 10 days rehab. Okay, which is 10 days when you've smoked pot for since you were 13 and you're like 30. It was like, 10 days. Well, that's a start. So I was really happy for him. But I wasn't sure what would come out of there. But after 4 days, he got out of the rehab. The excuse was that he tried to call me one evening and I wasn't answering because I was at some playground with my kids and I didn't have my phone. But he was really anxious that something had happened to us, and he came back home. He got out of the rehab, and I was really, of course I wasn't happy. I told him, I said, well, you know, I'm happy to see you, but I'm not happy that you've left early.
Mhm.
But he was like, oh, you know, it was like, he was a changed man, and he had spent 4 days there, and it was like 2 months, you know, he had had so many, he had had an epiphany, and I was, okay, why not, you know what? And at first he was really nice and taking responsibility for stuff, but then he became dry drunk, and he became blameful, and it was all blames. And, you know, telling me, oh, you're the reason why I smoke. And I was just, but at that point, I was so well, you know, with the Stay or Go program and with all the help that I had received, I was able to, like, almost laugh in his face and say, why? You're saying I'm the reason you smoke? Like, you've begun smoking when I was a toddler, okay? I didn't know you at all, so no, I'm not the reason you smoke.
Smart.
So at that point, I was able to not take any responsibility for that. Yeah, so he became a dry drunk, and I, thanks to Stay or Go, and I also had a counselor at that point that really helped me implement some boundaries. I told him I don't want any smoking in my house and in my life. And because I had discovered that I had never put that boundary, but I was really uncomfortable with him smoking in my house and with having this drug in my life. So I said, no, I don't. That's not happening anymore. And at first he said, okay, yeah, you're right. It's true. I can't smoke anymore. But then after a couple of weeks when he became dry drunk, he said, oh, well, you know, I could try maybe sometimes. And then one night we went to the restaurant and he told me, you know, this boundary of yours, it's just another way for you to control me. So, I don't want to respect it. If you want me to have this boundary, well, we're just not together anymore. So that night I was really shocked, and I said, okay, well, yeah, that's okay for now. Okay, for now you can take off the boundary. But then I talked to my counselor, and I had the support of my Stay or Go sisters, and I realized, well, no, you have the right to have this boundary. It's not a crazy boundary. It's not crazy to ask for no drugs in your life. So at some point I just asked him to talk, and I told him we were done. And that's when I decided that we were done for real.
Wow. I love your tenacity. I love your gumption. I love your fortitude. The fact that you kept reaching out for help over and over and support over and over, and you made courageous decisions, and then when they were challenged, you went to your resources and you checked in and said, is this okay? Am I doing this right? Because I think that as women, we get scared to ask for help, and we get embarrassed if we don't get it right the first time, and we let our kind of insecurities prevent us from forming those connections and relationships with women that we need to help get us through this season of our life. So I absolutely adore that you are just continuing to make these really wise choices and not holding yourself up to a place of like perfection, but just continuing to grow and grow and grow and getting stronger and stronger, which is amazing because you sound like a completely different person than when you first started this story. So, and I can't imagine how much having addiction in your childhood kind of played a role in all of this, right? Like if you're growing up with addiction, it's what you're used to. I know so many people and so many women fall into the trap of marrying somebody and continuing that cycle because it's what they're used to. They're comfortable. They see this person and they look into their eyes and they think, oh, that's my soulmate. And it's not their soulmate. It's just that they're being reminded of something familiar from their childhood. And so I admire you so much, and I think that you should be so proud of yourself for growing as much as you have.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michelle. And it's true, I am so proud. I could shout it, if it were not that I live in a really small community and I don't want to destroy my ex-husband's reputation, I would shout it because I'm really proud of myself. You're right. And if I hadn't had all the support, I would still be in that relationship. We need support, and living with addiction, it makes your life crazy. It's something that you need. You need to have something to guide you, or to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm so grateful for all the help that I had on my path, and I'm so grateful for you and for LOA and the Cerebral program, because I learned so much, just saying stuff like, okay, you can let it go. You can let it fall apart. You often say that in the podcast and in the program. And no, but that I remember this phrase. It was one night, and I was still trying to fix things, and my counselor was like, well, you don't need to fix things, anymore. You're not obliged. And I was like, okay, maybe I can learn to communicate better. And at some point, I remember I was driving, I was in my car, and I thought, yeah, you can let it go. You can, just let it fall apart.
Yeah.
You are the only one who's trying, who's doing something. And so just sometimes there's little sentences from people that we meet, or like in your program, and these sentences, they're the little rocks that help us, to break free.
Yeah. Yeah, those are key. I think Al-Anon coined the phrase "let it go," which I think is so brilliant. I wish I had come up with it myself, but I definitely did not. That's one of the good takeaways. They have some really good phrases. You can Google them if you ever need them. But I also want to point out something before we go, which is super important. I think it's absolutely that out of this story, you are clearly the hero of this story. And not just because you asked for help and you surrounded yourself with mentors and support, that you are willing to do the work, willing to go back to your past and take a look at how the past molded your future, but also you're the hero of the story because you just saved your kids. And I know your children are still young, but as somebody who has teenagers, and I pulled my kids out of a home with addiction, there isn't a day that goes by that I am not completely grateful that I did that, because you want to talk about breaking the cycle of addiction. You want to make sure that your kids beat the odds of that genetic predisposition that they might have. You are giving them the best possible chance by getting them out of the daily life of addiction and providing them a new safe and healthy and loving environment. And that is going to pay off for you and for them tenfold, because every kid in America and Canada and across the world is going to get offered drugs, is going to get offered alcohol, and they're going to have to make that decision in their life. It's inevitable. And statistically, because I've done the research, our kids are far more vulnerable to addiction because of their genetics and because of their family history than other kids. So what you just did might not only have saved you, but it might have saved your children as well. And so I hope that one day, and I do believe that one day they will thank you for this if they're not thanking you already.
Thanks. And you are so right. And yes, I did this for my kids. You know, my ex-husband, he was like, "Oh, you're destroying our family. You're only thinking of yourself." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. I am thinking first of my kids, because I grew up in a house where addiction was considered normal, and look where I am." You know, I'm married and addict. So I want to give my kids the chance to understand that their dad is sick and to maybe make another choice. As you say, I'm afraid a bit for them, of course, because I know that some stuff is against them, but I think we can educate them. And by taking them out of this environment, of course, it's giving them a lot of more chances.
Yeah. Well done. Well done. I'm really grateful. And I'm so impressed with the way you communicate and tell your story. And I know you offer tons of helpful tips that I hope people can re-listen to and take notes, because there was some great tips that you shared. So thank you for being a part of our community, and thank you for being willing to talk to me. I am very proud of you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
You're welcome, sweetie. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. You all are the reason that we do what we do, and it means the world to us to hear your feedback. You can email us anytime at info@loveoveraddiction.com, and Lori will be there to help you out. If you're loving this podcast and want to help our community grow, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It helps the podcast become more discoverable to other women who are searching for answers. We read each and every review, and they mean so much to us, so thank you for taking your time to do that. In the coming weeks on the podcast, we have more interviews like what you heard today. Michelle will also be popping in with quick, actionable tips for your everyday life. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. And thank you again for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with Michelle's personal thoughts and beliefs. From one woman to another, bonded together by the fact we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.